Ahoyhoy gang, if this is your first time with us, welcome, and if you're joining us from a previous video, hey, we love to see it, and I hope you're doing well. It's a brand new retrospective review thing about an incredibly new show. I've actually been trying to figure out a way to review this series, and I think we're deep enough into our blocks that the beautiful absurdity of this show can be properly appreciated. I'm of course talking about the incredible, absolutely brilliant Royal Crackers. Probably one of the most unassuming shows you've seen bumps for. Most people wrote the series off, even myself included. Want to know what convinced me to watch it? I was watching Fired on Mars on Max. Watched the entirety of it. Just sat there, dumbfounded, and said, screw it, why not? Let's just see how bad Royal Crackers is. See if it could get the bad taste out of my mouth of wasting 6 hours on a show that didn't even get me to laugh once. I don't care. I don't care if I'm too dumb for the show. It needed to be better. So yeah, let's hate watch Royal Crackers. Let's find a moment that I could just tear into the show and dread ever having it on my screen. At the end of the day, I know it can't possibly be as bad as Fired on Mars. It'll at least get some chuckles, even if it screws up a little bit and it's just dumb for the sake of being dumb. I cannot emphasize this enough. Before I knew it, I was actually crying at a show about a cracker magnate's kids. Smiling friends? That's unparalleled quality right there, and I don't think anyone can even deny it. But all the hype for it, I think, grievously overshadowed how truly special this age of Adult Swim animation is and what Royal Crackers has accomplished. Now, am I saying it's going to be the next new Rick and Morty? Absolutely not. I wouldn't wish that on any show I like. Give that to Crapopolis. But I am saying if you don't support this series now and discover it 5 years later and get upset it was canceled, you're gonna regret it. In an age where media isn't always around and streaming services look for any reason to cancel great animated series, especially Warner with series like Close Enough, Final Space, and Infinity Train, it's important to sing the praises of one of the most underappreciated Adult Swim series of all time. Other than, of course, Perfect Hair Forever. I'll never forget you, Hot Dog Summer. So we must ask those 3 age-old questions. What worked? What failed? What Minecraft server ruining personality downloads will be curtailed? Go grab a whole sleeve of crackers and definitely not none, because it's time to review Season 1. We gotta get through this cast because I need to talk about it badly. So the series was made by Jason Ruiz, who also plays Steve, the professional brother Hornsby, who is a squeamish daddy's boy desperate to impress his downright catatonic father, Theodore Hornsby, also played by Ruiz, the stand-up guy and overall swoo dude that built the Royal Crackers brand. We have Steve's brother, rock god Theo Hornsby, played by stand-up comic Andrew Santino, who has come home to take over the family brand even though he could totally go out and tour and kick ass anytime he wanted with his hit band, Taint. Steve has his wife and business partner / advisor, Deb, played by comic legend Jessica St. Clair, and they have a son, Matt Hornsby, who, no big deal or anything, he's just played by Emmy Award-winning actor Myle Flanagan. Name not familiar to you? She plays Naruto. She is the English voice actor for everyone's favorite ninja mayor. You know her voice, and it's astounding that she's in a series like this. Crushes the role of Matt because of course she does, she's a pro, but terrific to see her in this regardless. They'd also have their lawyer, Darby, played by David Gabori, and their father's advisor and legal consultant, Al, played by voice acting legend Fred Tatasciore. And it wasn't uncommon for creators to voice the lead actors of their show. Sometimes they just couldn't afford anyone else. Sometimes they knew exactly what they wanted and how to deliver it. Remember Frisky Dingo? Adam Reed was like 8 characters in that entire series, including both Xander Cruz and Killface. Or even Zach Hadel and Michael Cusack in Smiling Friends as Charlie and Pim. There is absolutely a precedent for it, and Jason Ruiz does absolutely spectacularly. He's seriously underrated as a performer because he sets the tone beautifully. Steve is trying to prove he's ready to take over the company, and Theo wants to prove that Taint didn't leave him. He left Taint. The family starts to argue. Theo throws on some Taint for his dad to listen to, and he vows that he's going to blow everyone away with how great his social media campaign is going to be. So, like, 3 things. 1, Fred Tatasciore is absolutely amazing in the series, like absolute masterclass of a performance. You could tell he was having fun with the series, and I don't know, when the actors are having fun, that's when you know you've got something amazing. 2, when Theodore wheels himself to the stairs, he has an overly dramatic fall that truly encapsulates the show as a whole. You did see some of it in the beginning of the episode where Steve was eating licorice crackers and his nose started to bleed, but it's much better encapsulated here. Theodore just keeps falling, and they keep jumping to cuts where he's very obviously higher up than he should be. I know that sounds obvious when you watch it, but it's a joke that if you do it too short or too long, it's ruined. It's the souffle of jokes. It was just long enough to be absolutely perfect. They hit that perfect pitch of a joke. That is a perfectly cooked risotto of comedy. I know it sounds like I'm obsessing over a one-off joke, but it's more a symbol of something deeper that is so much more oomph than we appreciate. Even the next scene when they're talking about Theodore being in a super coma, or, you know, a suko, like what? The joke delivery is just, oh my god, it's so casual, so natural, so fun. Even the start of the entire episode is a perfect encapsulation of what you're getting with the show. You just haven't realized it until you get deeper in. I know there's other things to talk about, but seriously, can I tell you about the end of the episode? I remember sitting and watching this after Fired on Mars. It's like 1 in the morning, candles were lit, had a cat on my lap, I was grooving and enjoying the episode up to this point. Theo starts an ironic cracker-eating challenge that streamers take up, and they all begin to die off one after another because they choked to death. Choked on what? Oh, Steve wants people to believe in the company again, so he just throws pocket change into every box. Go ahead, scarf down those crackers. Maybe there's a nickel in there. And that's not even the lawyer going to Burger Boys, even though it totally gives him diarrhea. And then he proceeds to just shatter all the glass, just all the glass you could ever find just to go to the bathroom. I had a cleansing, full-body cry watching this episode. I'm not ashamed to admit that. I cried watching Royal Crackers because it was just so unapologetically funny. Who cares what happens to any of these people? Matt's okay. We like Matt. The rest of them, they're gonna suffer and largely deserve it. You know the happiest I was when I watched this episode for the first time? The end. Because I knew I had 9 more episodes I got to see. Like, make no mistake, Crumbling Empire is a 10 out of 10 and an absolute comedic spectacle that gave someone that was jaded about the adult animation landscape hope for a brighter tomorrow. It wasn't me, but I'm sure that happened to someone else somewhere out there. A thing to point out is that this is a 23-minute long Adult Swim show. Not a very common sight, all things considered, and honestly, it works way better for this show than I thought it would. It gives them time to linger on jokes and let them all grow on their own. And what does the second episode start with? Theo is going to take Taint back on tour, and Steve convinces him to take Matt along, and he'll let him take the car for his tour if he does. I truly need Andrew Santino to be in more things. The way he brings Theo to life, I have seen this man before. I have listened to him talk. I have seen him shotgun a Four Loko outside of Chuck E. Cheese on some idle Tuesday night. I know this man better than I know myself, and only because Andrew Santino, this absolute icon, brings this new metal wannabe backwards cap-wearing loser to life in the best possible way. He convinced the restaurant to have an open mic night so that he can write his name in Sharpie all over the sign-up sheet to have it reserved for the band. He's so perfect as a character. What's Steve and Deb up to? Oh, just watching Antiques Appraisal, which would actually feature Deborah Wilson, fun fact. Well, they're getting frisky on the couch and find some of Theo's edibles and decide to get all loosey-goosey. They then proceed to go on a drug-fueled rampage off of edibles, like drive their car off of a hill rampage, off of edibles. It's perfect. It's just perfect. Theo goes up to perform and gets cut off after doing a really solid performance, all things considered. Like, he's honestly, genuinely trying with this, unplugged thing, and then boom, a ventriloquist takes his spot and they do a heckling back and forth. And anyway, Theo hits the guy with his car after the show, and they have to get the company fixer to help him get rid of the body. The fixer would be played by one-of-a-kind comedy guy and overall vocal legend, Gilbert Gottfried. A man who also guest starred in Smiling Friends, and I don't know. I loved that he played God in that series, don't get me wrong, but this hits different. He's this old guy who actually believes in Theo, and he's dedicated to hiding the body and destroying the evidence, even going down with the tow truck into quicksand, which just isn't how quicksand works, but it doesn't matter. None of this matters. Everything is handled with such an earnesty that, yeah, sure, you have to believe it. If you don't believe it, everything falls apart. And I'm not afraid to say this show that I put on a whim brought me to tears laughing in one episode and made me actually emotional in the next. Again, Adult Swim animated series. It's not unheard of, but it's definitely rare for a series like this to be able to tether itself to your heartstrings so masterfully, but there's such an incredible, almost disgusting beauty at the core of this show. And if it can get that emotional attachment, like, say, Venture Brothers, Rick and Morty, Moral Oral, it shows that this show is in a class of its own. It is up there with the greats. I adore this episode. It was a brilliant send-off for Mr. Gottfried. It gave us the best of Theo and showed us some love between Deb and Steve, which is important to showcase. Also, Darby the lawyer is amazing. David Gabori makes Darby just so chaotic in the best way. I don't know. Sometimes you find a series that just resonates with your very being, you know? I feel like Royal Crackers is a formative show. You will have a better appreciation for the joys of life after watching it. And it's a show that looks like this. I mean, just look at it. Look at this. We're only 2 episodes in, and I've got a whole lot more praising to do. 10 out of 10 for this episode. Shouldn't be a surprise. Next slide. Rip to a legend. Gilbert, you were a real one. This is a lot. So it's time for the annual health inspection, where they're all ready to deal with Reggie, their inspector, and take him for a night on the town. Yeah. However, he's actually replaced by his brother Brent, who is no nonsense and played weirdly by Fred Armisen. It's odd seeing him show up in a project like this, but he does well with it. We also get more of Rachel, played by Stephanie Sheh, who, funnily enough, played Hinata in Naruto alongside, hundreds of other things to her name. I actually know her as Orihime in Bleach, but she's in a lot. It's all connected. Don't worry about it. So with Brent not falling for their usual tricks, Theo takes the gang out anyway to try and tempt Brent, while Steve, Deb, and Matt go over to Factory 37 to try and clean it up before the inspection, only to find out that Theodore had developed a pink goo that made the chickens in the processing plant into giant monsters that took out all the previous employees, and Reggie has been transformed into a giant chicken monster and the leader of these giant chicken beasts. Yes, the episode does slow down considerably compared to the first 2 episodes, but it is still not bad at all. You can't ride banger after banger and expect a perfect album. You gotta pace yourself. Remember, this show was developed for both streaming and broadcast, and honestly, it's definitely better streamed. Not only does the uncensored language just feel more natural, but man oh manity, this whole show has an incredible flow to it, and Factory 37 does a beautiful job of establishing that tempo. We're guided along through a very real monster movie, opposite Theo getting pissed there's no taint on the karaoke track list, and Brent getting the courage to not be a coward anymore. Like, overall, the episode is a 9 out of 10 and a beautiful example of a great pacing episode. It slows down, pulls back, and gives you this dreary horror feel that, I don't know, it's kind of cool watching the image of Theodore grow more and more chaotic and even evil. Even in the intro, the pictures flashing by paint a very different picture than the family wants to believe. There's just this creeping undertone that makes the whole thing just unsettling in the best way. Is it going to be anyone's favorite episode of the show? No, probably not. But even Fred Armisen brings a fantastic performance, and the episode shows the success of the previous episodes wasn't a fluke. They have a formula they want to develop slowly but surely, and it works. Factory 37 is a chicken-flavored 9 out of 10. We learn why Steve was named Steve this episode. Because his dad couldn't be bothered to correct the nurse when he had crackers in his mouth. So instead of Steve, he's Steve. I love this episode so much. This is one of my favorite pieces of media of all time, bar none. Steve admits he has a weird name to the coffee girl, and I mean, you really see the trauma he has bottled up, and it's amazing. Like, just imagine your dad named you based off what he thought of you as a baby. You would never be able to outgrow his disappointment in you. Your name is a constant reminder that you're not good enough. Like, that's chilling stuff right out the gate. And then there's Deb, who, oh my god. Deb is photoshopping Matt onto the body of a skateboarder and posting it as she tries to manage her family vlog that is arguably one of the most pathetic things ever in the absolute best way. She has a vision board and everything you'd hope she'd have. She is a self-fulfilling prophecy of live, laugh, love, cringe, and I am here for it. This show has truly and unequivocally healed something inside me I didn't know was broken. Deb's taking all these dumb photos to try and impress everyone after the people on social media absolutely justifiably say that her pictures of Matt are totally fake and mock her because they're so blatantly fake. We're then introduced to Theo's friend and former bandmate Lars, played by Gareth Edwards, who also executive produced Hoops. So, you know, it's all connected, I guess. Lars starts pushing himself into Deb's photos and actively pushing Steve out so he can take over the family. Steve gets horribly sunburnt and has to wear sunscreen, otherwise he might get even worse, and even his doctor runs away from him, disappointed in who Steve is. Like, Theo and Matt see what Lars is doing and know it isn't right, but they can't stand up for Steve. Steve needs to do it for himself. And when he finds out that Lars uses women up and moves on to the next one, he gets into a gibberish rap battle sing-off against Lars and completely eviscerates him with over 30 years of unbridled rage, literally turning the poor man to dust. Like, the end of the episode is perfect. It's just the best. You could think it's just a dream sequence, but he goes to the coffee shop, he gets a cup with Steve written on it, and he uses it as a post. He earned his victory and drives off with a smile. There is no tire blown out in the last minute or some last gag taking the wind out of his sails. It's literally just Steve earning and getting a win. It only exists for Steve to win. This episode was true and genuine art, and I adore it. The music has been amazing throughout, but I mean, huge shout out to Jason Ruiz for just bringing Steve to life masterfully. Also, he's chilling as Theodore, and it just, man, I'm rambling, I know I am, but Steve is a perfectly enclosed episode. You don't need to know anything about the show for it to have a satisfying payoff. There's a modern idea of what art can be, and then there's art in a world after Steve aired. Everything just hits different now. Steve is a 1,000 out of 10. This episode, we get our first appearance of Deb's rival, Mel Dennison of the Dennison family, played by Lennon Parnham. who's actually worked with Jessica St. Clair throughout the years on all kinds of different projects, and they play off of each other spectacularly. Her husband, that Steve is desperate to impress, is Ron Dennison, played by true icon of the very idea of true comedy, Andrew Daly. When I heard Andrew Daly in the series for the first time, I wept as I gazed into the abyss, for I understood it gazed back onto me. He's the best. He's the absolute, true, and unbridled best. You ever watch Review, the US remake of the UK classic? Well, guess what? Andy Daly is the main guy in it. And want to guess who plays his wife? That's right, Jessica St. Clair. It's all connected. If anyone tells you it isn't, they're lying to you. He got to pancakes, divorce, more pancakes with Jessica St. Clair. That means something. It's a lot of perfect pieces in a lot of perfect places. That's all I'm saying. Well, turns out that Deb has been nominated for Business Mom of the Year, and a writer begins following her around as she tries to put on the appearance that she has the perfect family. Meanwhile, Matt is running around and just stuffing food down his gullet like a mad lad because he's been secretly running over to the Dennisons and they've decided to adopt him. It's a weird episode that is absolutely elevated by the vocal talent at work. This series could have fallen flat on its face if these jokes were delivered even slightly off-kilter, but Jessica St. Clair is an absolute pro who really brings Deb to life this episode. We get to see Steve, Deb, and Matt bond as a family as Matt realizes he doesn't want to be with the Dennisons and their dumb rules and misses his real family, which is honestly just perfect and something we needed to see. Business Mom is honestly probably one of the weakest episodes of the entire season. It does drag in some parts, and yes, some of the jokes just don't land quite right, but, my hand is kind of forced on this one. Business Mom is a hard-working 8 out of 10. Like, even then, even at the lowest of the entire season, 8 out of 10? Show's still heat. If you haven't seen this show yet, you're doing yourself a disservice. I have no problem talking about when one of my favorite shows has a bad season. I will be fair and unbiased, and this show is just unilaterally excellent. I mean, even if it's an 8 out of 10, the last joke of the entire episode had me doubled over crying, and it's a joke that if you're not watching the screen, you're not gonna get. Matt's book report is one of the best jokes I've ever seen in my life, and I want everyone to know that that joke alone is what true comedy is like. I mean, you don't think about it until it happens, but when it does, it destroys you at your very core. Theo doesn't know the proper month-day layout, much like his father, as the family tries to organize a celebration for Theodore's birthday and no one comes, so we get a flashback to Theodore's former business partner, Luther Dennison, and the start of the Royal Crackers empire that started with Theodore tricking an orphanage into buying his crackers by pretending the competitor's crackers were his, as well as the origins of the family rivalry between the Hornsbys and the Dennisons. He's haunted by the ghost of a child in an iron lung, he goes on a wacky adventure through a bog, and encounters cannibals while ultimately learning nothing from effectively a Mr. Scrooge story. I know this is all broad strokes, but this is an episode that needs to be seen and experienced. It's a very stark tonal shift that actually really kinda works. Again, the show didn't need any of this. But what we got was chilling in the best way and a masterclass in showing that things are not as they seem. Theo, on the outside, looks like a very accomplished businessman, but on the inside, he's so self-centered, so self-absorbed, and yet so emotionally underdeveloped that he has to always be right, can never be wrong, and will force an opinion until he is in the right. He will not stop until everyone addresses him with respect that he believes he deserves. There's an actual through line to an Adult Swim show. Not totally unheard of, but again, rare and shows we're dealing with something truly special. Mayworth is, it's not what I was expecting and somehow more magical than I could ever hope. It's slow, absolutely, but it's methodical in showing us who the real Theodore Hornsby is. You keep waiting for the other shoe to fall, and sure, you can argue it did, but then it just sort of goes right back to how things were. It won't be the last we see of Grandpa Hornsby's origins, but this was a chilling first proper outing with the patriarch, even seeing him come back and have a confrontation with Luther, which, was a lot. Mayworth is a foundational 9 out of 10. Steve and Deb try and sneak their way onto a private mega yacht party to network with 0.1 percenters led by George Zebos, played by George Basil. Theo ends up gambling at a game he doesn't understand, and Matt finds love with a robot, and it's both a brilliant satire of the 1% and just an absolute wild episode that, again, feels like the cracks in what we know are showing more and more. They're trying to reach into a world they very obviously don't belong in, and there's a very poignant scene where while Tanya, the robot, is helping a guy go to the bathroom, she's appreciating how human Matt is and how much potential he has to do genuine good. These moments don't need to be here, I've said this before, but they perfectly exemplify the hubris of man. Everything obviously quickly starts falling apart. George Zebos has Doc Ock tentacles and a weird sense of humor, and it just works though. There's a brilliant amount of tension, and things are on fire and blowing up all around the family, and it was at this moment I truly loved these characters. They were the perfect pieces for this story. Only they could ride this kind of chaos. I don't know, this episode is just a terrific ride, and I kind of wish I had more to say about it, but it's really just a showcase of the joke delivery on the show. And I think that's what makes the show work. It's very believably unbelievable. Everyone completely accepts that they live in a weird time and weird things are going to happen, and some people, like Al, have seen some things. There is never really a moment where you feel they pulled back on an idea. These all feel completely invested in, and every time I look back, and just forewarning, I rewatched the show 4 times for this review, 6 times in total, that I made as an April Fool's video. Yet every time I look back, each episode is just banger after banger. This and Factory 37 may feel like filler episodes in a way, but that doesn't take away any of their value. Not to mention it does give us the first introduction of George Zebos, and even at my most critical, it's still an absolute delight of an episode. The 0.1% is a tax-avoiding 9 out of 10. It's 1846! We get a flashback to some Mexican military and miners going down and discovering an ancient chalice that's naturally evil, and the general's daughter harnesses the power of the chalice and teleports away. Oh, and Steve and the family are off to beautiful Burbank since they got the royal crackers on a Mexican sitcom. Darby screws up the car rental and unveils the entire mystery of the McDonald's Monopoly game as seen in the documentary McMillions on HBO Max. It's perfect. I love this all so much. Darby has to look after Theodore, and they go all home alone as thieves attempt to break into the house that Matt is just also, in. Carlos Alazaraki plays quite a few characters in the episode, and honestly, he elevates the episode as a whole just by being there. I don't know, he doesn't phone it in at all, and I appreciate that no matter what he's in, you are gonna get his best. He is always going to be a pro, and I don't know, I really love hearing his voice. He's great. I've grown up listening to the man, and it's fantastic hearing him here. The Earl Grey Bandits plan to steal the chalice that apparently Theo has been using as his road pimp cup. The traveler they work for would be played by Carolina Ravassa, who also plays Sombra in Overwatch. Steve watches the show, and the main character proceeds to eat royal crackers and then violently gets ill and dies. It's so easy to explain what happens in the episode, but the jokes are incredible. This episode makes Darby shine on his own, and it's absolutely wonderful. He became one of my favorite characters instantly. Turns out that Theo stole the chalice from the traveler, and Steve has to watch his crackers get literally beaten up for what they did to poor Tio Pepe. Steve fights the show producer, Darby fights the Earl Grey Bandits and takes them all out while showing off his sick inline skating skills, and then teleports back to 1995 so he could win the McDonald's Monopoly contest he saw on McMillions on HBO Max. I know it seems like I'm hung up on trying to explain this one joke, but genuinely it's that kind of comedy that makes the show sing. The delivery is perfect and so confident, and again resonates with it being made for both Adult Swim proper and streaming on HBO Max. These people 100% believe what they're saying and what their lines are, and they say it with such conviction that you start to believe it too. It's reminiscent of BoJack Horseman in a lot of ways in that regard. You just sort of accept that there's animals and people and they're gonna intermingle, and that's just gonna have to be okay. Don't think about it. If they never sit down and establish that this is how the world works, they can decide what they want to add to that world on a whim. Casa de Darby lives or dies off of Carlos Alazraqui and David Gabori, who honestly needs way more credits to his name. This man is gonna be somebody. This man brought Darby to life in a way that just makes him sing. I really want him to do more things, because I have not laughed harder than when Darby is just failing his way to greatness this entire episode. Casa de Darby is a rigged by the mob 10 out of 10. Honestly, McMillions is actually pretty interesting. I'm not even gonna lie. Like, if you have the time, check out McMillions on HBO Max. Steve is determined to beat the denizens at this year's CrackerCon, is even busting out his Captain Cracker costume, theme backstory and all, while Theo brings in a cracker cannon that they agree to keep hidden so no one steals the idea. Theo is determined to go and see his favorite stripper, Hazelnut, and do his ritual to get in the proper headspace to rock an entire auditorium's eyeballs to the back of their skulls. She doesn't work at the strip club anymore, and he goes into an awkward panic where he's ducking and weaving bouncers to eventually try and print off her information. He finds out she's married and has kids and just awkwardly fumbles all around, all while Al, Darby, and Rachel cheer on their hero, and he puts on the most genuinely pathetic display of all time, and it's just perfect. He runs in with such confidence. When he's talking to her mom, and he goes like, you can see how much I'm shaking. His hand is still. His hand is so still, and he just keeps pulling attention to it, and it's beautiful. And it's just, Santino is amazing. Oh, it's a joke. The show is a joke, but it's great. We love the show. The denizens find out about the cracker cannon and steal it, and Theo is defeated while Steve, in his superhero costume with a questionable backstory, wallows feeling like all his ideas have failed. However, as Ron starts firing his cracker cannon into the crowd, he hits the giant dragon animatronic, and it goes crazy, breathing fire everywhere, so Steve runs in and shields his family with a suit to keep them safe, because, you know, it can maintain the temperature of an oven cooking crackers for some reason. Hazelnut leaves her family to be with Theo, and everything is good. The episode feels like a season finale in a lot of ways. You could cut the entire show here and it would have been a perfect place to end it. And I think that goes to show the strength of these individual episodes. You could even argue you could end it at Steve and it would still be really good. Which means they are going into this with each episode having the potential to be a series finale because they want each one to have that impact. I mean, CrackerCon is easily one of the strongest episodes of the entire show, and a celebration of how far it's come. There's only so many ways I can say an episode like this works, but I think this is a real testament to Adult Swim-style animated series as a whole. They're usually written off as these stoner comedies, but you have to be incredibly creative to squeeze jokes out of this style. There is an art to what's being done here, and it really is something genuinely magical. CrackerCon is a Peggle 2 rejoicing 10 out of 10. And here we are, the season finale. I said that CrackerCon could be the season finale, but then we wouldn't have this just absolute spectacle. When I watched Fired on Mars, I heard the ringing of a universe slowly shrinking in on itself and was so bored out of my mind, I was pacing back and forth while watching that godforsaken show. How? How do you have all the talent in the world and still manage to be boring? No, I don't care that Stanley from The Office is in it. He's doing this weird voice, and I don't know who it's for. It's the whole show. It's just like, who is this for? This episode, in comparison to that, to all of that, is like seeing a sunrise over a still lake for the very first time. Like, Oliver Tree guest stars this episode, and that alone is weird, sure, and just like, yeah, man, hell yeah, sure, why not? Man makes some bops, but like, yeah. Matt gives a speech about his love for Craftopia, which is basically just Minecraft, and gets bullied for having something that he enjoys doing with his buddy that isn't conventionally enjoyable. Oh, and then while he's minding his own business, he gets swatted because a famous YouTuber classmate just loves pranking him and they end up shooting his computer. So Steve makes Matt earn a new one, even though it was literally not his fault in any way that any of this happened. And like, yeah, you get your kid a new computer at that point. You don't punish him for something he didn't do. But it's a way to get Matt in the company, and Steve even shows off the lobotomized friends he roughhouses with while Matt looks around and is invited up to the board by Al and, more surprisingly, an AI of Theodore Hornsby who wants to make Matt the head of Royal Crackers. This makes the rest of the family jealous as Matt rises to fame and Theodore trains him for the cutthroat world of cracker sales. He tells him there's no room for weakness like Al's pitiful girly hobby of wanting to ski on some fresh powdery nar like some kind of weak little loser boy. So Theodore has Matt burn down the world that he and Donut Fart 69 had built together. With everything in ruins, Theodore tries to capture Matt so he can imprint his mind into Matt's and take him over so that he can rule over his cracker kingdom once more. Al realizes it's totally cool to love to ski and goes to save Matt and stop yet another of Theodore's maniacal schemes. The episode ends with Matt building his own PC with the money he earned and pulling his bed over as he sat and waited for a chance to apologize to his friend and eventually rebuild their world. Matt could have been just a Chris Griffin. Some episodes he's just in the background adjusting boob jiggle sliders, and then some episodes he's like this. You have him having one of the most human stories of the season, and the episode because of it is just a powerhouse. The episode isn't nearly as funny as Cracker Con or even Steve, but there's just such an unmistakable charm at the core of this episode. A heart that beats resolutely. I adore this episode, and it's elevated by the absolutely incredible performance of not only Myle Flanagan, which, wow, never thought it would work, and she has proved me wrong at every turn, but also Fred Tatasciore. Really, throughout the entire series, he has been bringing this great passion to his delivery. I think it's best exemplified with this episode. You can tell he's the one that's been riding the ship from the shadows. Al is such a great character, and I genuinely appreciate what they've set up here. Even that end shot, that end moment, seals this as a perfect season finale. Craftopia is a world-building, eye-opening, inner self-healing 10 out of 10. And there we have it. That's season 1. Anything you think I was right on, wrong on? What was your favorite episode? Least favorite? Let me know in the comments below. And if you liked what you saw, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Look, I know that criticism is always going to have some personal sway. We cannot ignore our biases when we review things, no matter how much we try or how much we want to pretend like we can. Maybe I genuinely and truly am looking at this series with rose-tinted glasses, because it just works for me personally. But with everything on display here, Royal Crackers might end up being one of my top 5 Adult Swim series of all time. It's got everything you could ever want from an Adult Swim show while still feeling obscure enough that it won't get swept up into pop culture and lose its identity, and next thing you know, there's a giant inbred Naruto in orbit. When instead, here's Naruto playing Minecraft. Royal Crackers is fun. It's not overly complicated. It's not trying to be deep or cerebral, but then there's more to it than you'd initially expect. Even right from the pilot, you're getting blasted with just banger after banger joke, and the show had a truly perfect first season. At no point was I wishing for it to end, and I genuinely encourage everyone to check out the first 2 seasons available at the time of writing this, and please support the official release if you're able. We need to make sure people know about shows like this. Tell your friends about it. I don't want to lose another gem after Close Enough. I'm not strong enough. I can't do it. Not again. Royals Crackers is something different in the best possible way. There's something truly beautiful to it. And I truly hate the cynicism in a world where we can't talk about the series that we love. Anyway, that's going to do it for us today. Happy April 1st, everyone, and a huge shout out to our patrons and members who keep this ship afloat. You guys are the real ones. And if you want your name featured here, become a member or patron today. Exclusive posts, early access to upcoming season reviews, and so much more. Thank you all so much for watching. Like always, stay strong, keep fighting, and know that I always believe in you. Even just waking up in the morning is no small feat, and understand you are seen. Keep going, always forward, never back. I'll see you all next time. Goodbye, everybody.